All right, so we're working, we've just reviewed logo designs and you finished those up, and you will work on making those revisions that we talked about in class today and make those and then add them to your work. But you do have, I would say, until the midterm break to kind of till the midterm grades are due, and I'll point that out when that's going to be due for you to really get those logos to where you really want them. So work through that. Remember, there's tutorials here that you might have not thought about it applying to your particular project, and by the way, I put these on there because they were gorgeous as we worked through them, and I'll keep uploading what you had. But there's tutorials in here, specifically some of these ones that use the 3D looks of using layer styles. Some of you could benefit from some of those, and then the painting methods that we saw get employed from the gem with using selections to paint is an important process. Some of you, we've talked about outer glows. You can do that with painting, or you can use some of the outer glow methods. So maybe you might want to look through some of those, and remember that we've got the Q&A stuff here. Paste into is absolutely one of the tricks to make things look like it's got more texture. So getting textures and pasting them into is something to add that extra refinement, like adding marble to it or something like that. So moving forward into our environment design, this is a background for your game. So this is a space in which the characters will play. Some of you, I think, like Michaela, has the characters talking in front, so you've already determined that. But think about, it's not just any background, it's a background for your game. So how does the character interact with it? All interior or exterior assets should propel the story forward. So each little asset in there needs to be like, this is a part of this really messy wizard's kitchen, or this is a part of the story of a windy city or something. So you really just need to think about story a lot as you move forward with that. Sometimes bitmap or vector for this project, we're going to be working in Photoshop and using those techniques. So you've already grabbed your 3 environment benchmarks, and if you haven't, make sure you put those on the slides. Our next step is working on 9 grayscale thumbnails. So, but moving forward, to help us to understand how this project is going to go, we move from thumbnails to grayscale sketches to color keys and one multi-plane color final, because we'll think about how can we actually animate it. Since this is concept and production, we want to take it from the concept, which is a sketch. Can be very rough, to even more finished concept, but can we actually, if we're going to do multi-plane, how will we layer things? It doesn't take too much effort to actually be ready to make it turn into an animation. So we want to think about how you can use foreground, midground, and background in the piece. This talks about the file size, eventually being this, but when you're working, you need to be working with a larger file size to help you to make sure that you can zoom in and get your painting and your details. There is a template, but this is HD formatted and needs to be altered for the iPad format. Some of you are working in iPad dimensions. Some of you are using different dimensions. So there's so many moving targets for the digital platforms. So somewhere within there. Most of us are doing horizontal, which is the best approach. So is there anyone that is doing vertical for their game? Okay. Horizontal is helpful because it can go to your computer screen too, and not to be able to be seen. Here's some color keys, and moving into the final colors. Just more painting. Pinterest boards are on here. So the schedule works like this. Today is the 4th of February. And you were to have finished your design, your logo design in the 3 colors, the 3 colorways. So work through that if you haven't finished that out. For those of you that were here today, it was really awesome to see your work, and you have some revisions to work through, which if I move forward into time, midterm grades are due here. So I will need your midterm revisions on everything here. So let me write that. Midterm revisions due. So the way that my classes work is you have up until this time to keep on working and keep on iterating stuff. And the students that take advantage of that, the work is stronger. So think about how you can incorporate what you're learning in class and my redo paint overs to help make your work better, okay? But we're not done with these necessarily, we're just pushing them forward. So next class, I would like for you to have 9 environment design thumbnails. So if I click into this, there's not actually a link for the project, but if we go to the course site and we click on environment design and then environment thumbnails, it's there. If you're coming from the environment design project, the 9 grayscale thumbnails. It's a little bit of a description here, which is also going to be here, but I'll go over it here. We need you to number them. That's one of the things that you may have noticed when I worked through your slides and stuff today. It's helpful for us to number 1, 2, 3, etc., so that people can communicate about them. I want you to explore different compositions, locations, and angles. So we've seen a lot of examples in your benchmarks that might be like top down or a little bit more of a platformer. Think about what will function the best within your whole game. So go back to your entire game benchmarks and think about what's the best view to have to tell the story through your visual. All of these must be for your game and be a gameplay background, and leave space for your GUI and your character. So we looked at some of the examples today where there was really good, let me share a different screen. Okay, so this is when I had sketched over Anna's pieces. We're seeing the background, we're seeing everything kind of point in at the cards and the characters that we want to look at, right? So there's also all these things kind of frame the composition. So you're not necessarily drawing this stuff, but you need to think about leaving room for it. And that this stuff here might cover up a whole bunch of stuff. So think about where your gameplay is going to be and leave room for that. Leave a sense of a space. Sometimes it's actually leaving a lighting. Sometimes it's actually putting a spotlight on that spot. So when you're thinking in grayscale, which is what you're doing right now for your thumbnails, think about lighting shapes. You can see everything here is pointing at what we wanted to point at. So those were really fantastic thumbs to take a look at. Okay, going back to here. So let's take a look. Any questions about the general gist of it right now? Thumbs up. Yay. Grayscale thumbnails, here we go. So let's take a look at how we do this. This is a template that you can use. Now this is a 1920 by 1080 ratio, so be careful. And actually, I'm telling myself that we need a new template. So what I'm gonna do tonight is make a new template for you, and I'll make an announcement for you so that you can grab that, because this is not the right one. And then I'll put a download here. But essentially, this file, the way that this is set up, is the gray is on one background behind it, and the grid is on top. So you can paint underneath it. Okay, and there's going to be a template for you there. There's some collections of more professional ones there. There's a lot of different methods for you to do your thumbnails. You can do shape selection or painting with tone. So here's a professional example where we're doing grayscale thumbs. We're really just thinking about the arrows moving through the space. So in that other example that I showed with Anna's example, we did arrows and we pointed at stuff, right? So what do you want us to look at? Is this where the character is going to be? Is this where the character is going to be? You need to leave room for the character and where they're going to act. So think about that and think about how you need your space for your game. Like, is the character just tiny and moving through this space and fighting, dodging little chickens and stuff on the ground? Leave space for them to act. That's kind of important. Clear those. Um, Here's more thumbs. If you want to, you can work with gradients and kind of more painterly approach. That would be another thing. Here's an example where they're numbered. That's pretty important. Student examples working, not necessarily for game design, so I need to recognize that this one actually is for a game design by Bailey, where there's pancakes being attacked. It's called Food Fight. I think we've been looking at some of those examples. So platforms, where are your platforms going? How will your character move through that space? They can have the characters on them to help you to understand how that space will work. This one's a little bit more of like exploring and moving through a space. This was actually for an animation by Emily. Great example of just kind of quick studies where the characters will move, pointing towards areas. So you can see the styles can vary, it just depends on which kind of style that you want to work with. Just make sure they're grayscale. One of the things that students sometimes do is you make them in color and it gets too complicated. So just really think about tone, think about lighting in order to get there. Emily Suggs' work, Matthew Camilleri's work. So everybody's working in different styles, just depending on where their range is going to be. Let's take a look at the Pinterest board collection that Mike Williams put together for thumbs. So they really can vary in the industry depending on how you want to go. So stay really flat is helpful because you can really make some decisions of just big chunky shapes. That's a good place to start and then move into the gradients if you want to do it like that. Lighting, thinking about kind of haloing the parts that you want us to look at. All of these are doing like, we're pointing at stuff. So think about that. What are you going to point at? To Miss, I think it's Hannah, and your kind of gross and scary backgrounds, these might be some fun ones to kind of think about in terms of the interior or something. But since yours is actually all train, right? You always have the same background on the outside, and then stuff is happening on the inside, so you have to figure out what goes in there. A lot of these will be for film or for some other more exploratory stuff, not necessarily game. But essentially, these are concept art pieces within grayscale. They don't have to be fully all the levels of gray, but using brush and eraser next to each other is an effective way to make this function. So start big and then get into the littler details as you go. So detail, detail, detail later, moving from big chunks to little chunks. You may want to start with line drawings and then grayscale it out, but I do want them to be grayscale eventually. So they're thumbnails. Just recognize that they're little, they're thumbnails. You're going to do grayscale sketches later. So that we're going to pick one that's going to be the best approach. And then we'll do the thumbs, we'll move the thumbs to these grayscale sketches. Or one tone is in that example. SketchUp using 3D models if we need to. Then we'll do color keys where we'll work through deciding what kind of feeling do we want this environment to have, what time of day, what kind of year. We'll grab references. SketchUp will be one of the tools that we'll look at. If you have an architectural element, how can we use SketchUp and have that be a part of the process? And then we'll learn how to reference and then paint, grab textures and add more painting and lighting. That's a piece by Josh Miller that I worked on with him. Nolan Nasser, if you went to our event the other day on networking, this is the piece that he did for this class where he worked on a library environment, started with a SketchUp environment, got this out of SketchUp, did some painting, and then really this is texture filling. So those are not all painted individually. Those books, they're photos that are warped into the shapes and working through that and getting the lighting the way we want. So this is the final on that. So that's eventually where we're going to go to when we finally get there. You can see it feels really realistic, but Nolan didn't paint all of those. you might want to believe that, but so much of this comes from finding textures to fit into it and do paste into, and then we work in with our paintbrush afterwards. There's lots of tutorials along the way, brushes, color mode painting, adding color to grayscale, all of this stuff. These are tutorials that I'll walk you through as needed for your piece. And you may be working in a very kind of cutie style, like I know Wenjen's working a very cute cat pastel-y look. It will be very different than Nolan's. Everybody just needs to think about that. You're heading in a different way. So right now, thumbnails, and I need to get you a better template, which I promise to get for you at least by tomorrow morning, okay? So let's answer some questions.